You ready?
Sir.
Thank you. Thank you. Sorry for the.
No, good afternoon, everybody. On
Let me have the pleasure of introducing you to the
yes,
our audience. Dear friends, I'm sorry for the delay. And today I have the pleasure of in introducing Dr. Ganesh Deshmukh. He is an hemato-oncologist and a bone marrow transplant physician with an experience of 13 years. He is consultant hematologist, hemato-oncologist, and bone marrow transplant physician at Somajiguda Yashoda Hospital. And then he's got vast experience, and then he is doing his best, and then the best in as far as the bone marrow transplant is concerned. And then he is a good teacher to the students here and everywhere. And then he is going to speak on the approach to pancytopenia. It's a very good subject he has taken, and then it's useful for all the DNB students, whichever specialty they have chosen. So without wasting further time, I request Dr. Ganesh to go ahead with this topic. Dr. Ganesh.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for the kind introduction. Good afternoon, everybody on this August dais. Thank you so much, Balraju sir, and the all eminent teachers on this dais to give me this opportunity to share the virtual dais to discuss about one of the common hematology topics. Sir, can I be? I'm not able to share my screen, sir.
Yeah. Hello?
Sir.
Yeah. I think they are already requested to be ready. They were ready once. Hello? Is from Bangalore, from the umpires office?
Yes, sir.
Ready?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Please share the screen.
Yes, sir. It's you can, sir. Dr. Ganesh, you can share the screen, sir, please.
So at the outset, my apologies. I had some confusion, so I got delayed. So the topic of today's discussion is approach to pancytopenia, and it is going to be mostly a case-based approach to pancytopenia. So we all know that pancytopenia is a common clinical issue in our day-to-day clinical practice. And the objective of my talk today is, I'm sure at the end of this presentation, for all patients presenting with pancytopenia, you will be able to describe appropriate clinical evaluation and monitoring approach and implement effective therapy in most of the clinical scenarios. So by doing this, I'm going to just cover all what, where, when, which, and all aspects of pancytopenia. And most importantly, not all cases of pancytopenia need bone marrow studies. So which are the clinical circumstances where bone marrow evaluation is mandatory for assessment of pancytopenia in various clinical scenarios. And all this evaluation will help us managing patients with pancytopenia in the clinical practice. Now, coming to the challenges when we consider pancytopenia, I'm sure you will agree with me that pancytopenia is a common clinical scenario. The presenting history can be very subjective, and because it covers a broad area of differential, the approach to lab investigations is not standardized, and depending upon the underlying etiology, it is associated with various therapeutic opportunities. And many times after thorough evaluation, we end up with non-diagnostic results, confounding the picture further. And I'm sure at the end of this discussion, you will agree with me that it appears more scary than it actually is, the pertinent issue of pancytopenia. And most important, because of the broad differentials underlying, hematology consult is needed in majority of pancytopenia cases. Now, regarding the facts of pancytopenia, depending upon what kind of society you are catering in your practice, overall the incidence of pancytopenia, it constitutes about 5 to 10% of outpatient consultations. 2 to 5% might be severe, necessitating hospitalizations for transfusion or supportive care, and after extensive exhaustive evaluation, up to 20% may remain idiopathic. So essentially, you have to deal with patients of pancytopenia on a regular basis. So to precisely define pancytopenia is separation of all the three blood lineages in the peripheral blood, notably leukopenia and most importantly neutropenia with less than 1800 per cubic millimeter, thrombocytopenia and anemia with reticulocytopenia. So looking at the etiologies underlying pancytopenia, it varies according to different geographic pockets. Just for an example, the literature documented evidences like the infections. You can see in the pediatric population with pancytopenia from the developed nations like North America, infections constituted about almost 2/3 cases of pancytopenia, whereas in the Indian setting with similar pediatric population presenting with pancytopenia, something which is extremely rare in the Western hemisphere, aplastic anemia or marrow failure syndromes are quite common, constituting about 20% in this particular study population. Whereas in the adults, the incidence of aplastic anemia can be even little higher, like this Tropical Doctors 2008, aplastic anemia constituted about 40% of pancytopenia overall cases in their study population. So the etiologies does vary depending upon various geographic pockets. For example, Northeast or North India, where Kala Azar, Leishmaniasis associated splenomegaly and pancytopenia can be very common, whereas in the South India it is not that common. Even in our state, like Telangana, there are certain pockets where incidence of the pernicious anemia is very high. So the pancytopenia, many cases can be attributed to pernicious anemia. Before we start our case discussion, just to make the approach to pancytopenia simplified, you can divide the pancytopenia into three broad categories based on the underlying etiological association. For example, bone marrow replacement, it can be either malignant diseases involving marrow or non-malignant diseases. Among the malignant diseases, apart from hematological malignancies, metastatic disseminated solid cancers infiltrating the marrow can lead to pancytopenia by bone marrow replacement. Among the non-malignant causes of bone marrow replacement are various infections and various myelofibrosis, either autoimmune or associated with infections or various other autoimmune disorders. Now, second in class is bone marrow failure, which can be again divided into three broad categories: immune destruction, where most notable of these aplastic anemia. The bone marrow failure syndromes is because of immune destruction of hematopoietic stem cells, drugs, various cytotoxic drugs, and other etiologies like various autoimmune disorders like lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, sarcoidosis, or other hematological issues like large granular lymphocytic leukemia or HLH. Second causes of bone marrow failure is nutritional deficiencies, most notable of which are butyrol and folate, but rarely zinc and copper deficiency can also lead to bone marrow failure presenting with pancytopenia. The common infections, of course, disseminated vast array of infections can lead to pancytopenia, but most notable of them are viral infections like HIV, EBV, and hepatitis. Now, coming to the third category, that is destruction of the blood cells in the peripheral blood or sequestration in reticuloendothelial system like spleen, notably. So the causes in this category are either consumption like DIC, kind of AML, acute promyelocytic leukemia, or splenomegaly of various causes like cirrhosis, infections, autoimmune disorders, various hematological malignancies presenting with splenomegaly or primary myelofibrosis. So with this broad classification, etiological classification, let's jump on to our first case. This is a 45-year young gentleman presents with symptomatic anemia and tingling of numbness of hands and feet for reasonably medium duration of 35 days. On leading questions, he mentions that he also has a history of loss of appetite leading to significant weight loss associated with history of increased frequency of loose watery motions of similar duration. With this brief history, what we do next is we just do a hemogram, and you can see on hemogram there is pancytopenia, separation of all the three lineages, hemoglobin 5.9, WBC 1900, and platelets are moderately suppressed 63,000. Now with this characterizing anemia, with red blood cell indices. So his MCV is 119 femtoliters. So it is macrocytic anemia. So normal MCV is between 70 to 90 femtoliters. So anything above 90 is macrocytic and anything below 70 is microcytic. So he has macrocytic anemia. And second important RBC indices, which is important in deleting various etiologies, is RDW, which is a measure of red cell distribution width, that is measure of red cell variability. So normal RDW is 11 to 14. Here it is 26.2. So it is very high. So just a common rule of thumb, any anemia, microcytic or macrocytic with very high RDW, most of the times you are dealing with nutritional anemia. So here it is macrocytic anemia with high RDW. It might turn out to be nutritional or, for that matter, megaloblastic anemia. Again, reticulocyte count is low, 0.5%. So for the degree of anemia of 5.9, the reticulocyte count is quite low, extremely low. So this is hypoproliferative anemia. So how does reticulocyte count help us in deleting various etiologies underlying anemia? So normal reticulocyte count is 1 to 2%. That has to be corrected for the degree of anemia. For example, for a 45-year gentleman, the hemoglobin normal hemoglobin should be somewhere between 12 to 13 grams percentage. So it is decreased almost by 2.5 to 3 times. So the reticulocyte count has to be multiplied by 3. So normal reticulocyte count 1 to 2. So 2 into 3, 6. When a person has such severe anemia, again you have to consider a correction factor of 2 for severe anemia, because just for the simple reason that the immature red blood cell precursors like reticulocytes are made to release early from the reticuloendothelial system under immense erythroid stress, like severe anemia. So again 6 into 2, 12. So 12 reticulocyte count of 12 should have been adequate for this anemia, but it is 0.5. That means the marrow is not able to compensate for this degree of anemia. So it is hypoproliferative anemia. If marrow compensates for the degree of anemia, it is hyperproliferative anemia. So this is macrocytic anemia, hypoproliferative with high RDW. So one of the differential is it might be a case of megaloblastic anemia. So this was his brief history, hemogram, and now his clinical presentation. So this is how his hand looked like. So you can very well guess that hyperpigmented knuckles. On oral examination, there is smooth, glossy, atrophic tongue. And on the peripheral smear, you can see there are a lot of something called as macrocytes. So macrocytic red blood cells. And in the middle is a neutrophil, which has almost 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 nuclear lobes. So normally neutrophil have 3 to 4 nuclear lobes. So hypersegmented neutrophils are when there are more than 5% neutrophils with more than 5 nuclear lobes, or there is any neutrophil with more than 6 or 7 nuclear lobes. So hypersegmented neutrophils, macrocytic RBCs, and this clinical picture in constellation with the hemogram is suggestive of megaloblastic anemia, right? So now megaloblastic anemia is not a diagnosis in itself. It is the first step towards evaluation of such cases. So before I do that, so like an ECG for a cardiologist, endoscopies for gastroenterologists, and various imaging for neurologists, hemogram is a very vital tool for hematological cases evaluation. And by hemogram, I just mean the numerical values, but these graphical histographic pictures also. So the RBC histogram, platelet histogram, and WBC histogram. If you master the art of reading hemogram, many of hematological cases, I will say more than 80 to 90% of hematological cases, you will be able to sort out with regard to their possible underlying causes. So as I mentioned earlier, megaloblastic anemia is not a diagnosis in itself, just like this cartoon. The X-ray is showing broken rib and we are trying to fix it with Photoshop. So like that, megaloblastic anemia needs to, not all cases of megaloblastic anemia are nutritional. So if a patient with appropriate clinical history, a nutritional anemia or nutritional megaloblastic is ruled out, you should work up further to pinpoint the exact etiology underlying megaloblastosis. Like in our case, it was megaloblastic anemia. The patient has mixed dietary habits, and then based on that, we did further workup. So upper GI endoscopy showed pale atrophic gastric mucosa. For that, we did the further workup for pernicious anemia, and he was found to be intrinsic, anti-intrinsic factor antibody positive. So the implication of such etiological workup is in pernicious anemia, because there is atrophic gastritis with either anti-intrinsic factor or antiparietal cell antibody positivity, leading to failure of oral B12 supplements. So these patients will need lifelong parenteral B12 supplements. Also, because in atrophic gastritis, the incidence of GI malignancy is high, these patients will require annual GI endoscopic surveillance, right? So useful tips from case number 1 is pancytopenia with jaundice. The causes can be not only hemolytic anemia, but the hemolytic anemia like paroxysmal nocturnal hemoglobinuria, but megaloblastic anemia many a times presents, the patients with megaloblastic anemia presents with pancytopenia to hepatologist or gastroenterologist. Again, pancytopenia with coagulopathy, two important differentials to consider is one of the deadly but most curable hematological malignancy, a type of AML, acute promyelocytic leukemia, AML M3, with cure rates exceeding, diagnosed in time and treated well. And the other important differential of pancytopenia with coagulopathy is DIC. Coming on to case 2, this is a 39-year lady, again with a short history of symptomatic anemia with generalized weakness and fever for 2 weeks. Also, she had history suggestive of bleeding gums, nose, ecchymotic patches all over the body of short duration 3 days. So compared to case 1, this lady has pancytopenia with symptomatic all 3 lineages cytopenia, right? So the case 1 has only symptomatic anemia. This lady has symptomatic anemia, probably fever because of symptomatic neutropenia, and symptomatic thrombocytopenia in the form of mucocutaneous bleed. Now, with this history, we did hemogram. You can see again pancytopenia with hemoglobin of 7.3 grams per cent, WBC is 1100, and platelets are 40,000. Now, this profuse bleeding profile, severe bleeding profile, is disproportionate for the degree of thrombocytopenia. You in your clinical practice, you hardly see a patient with platelet count of 40,000 presenting with such severe bleeding profile, right? So based on her bleeding profile, we did coagulation profile upfront in this case, and to our expectations, the PT-APTD is sky high with extremely low fibrinogen of 40 milligram per deciliter. So this lady has pancytopenia with symptoms arising from each of the cell lineages, and along with that, she has coagulopathy. Now, based on that, again the hemogram, the macrocytic anemia, and another important feature in evaluating leukopenia is the WBC differential. Now you can see for this young lady, neutrophils are 0, but there are some abnormal cells called as promyelocytes. So pathologists called us and told us that there are some abnormal promyelocyte-looking cells in her peripheral smear. So I'm sure the diagnosis you might be clear in your mind. So pancytopenia with coagulopathy with circulating promyelocytes. So this is how she looked like. She has a severe bleeding profile disproportionate to the degree of thrombocytopenia, and that is explainable by her concurrent coagulopathy. And on the peripheral smear, there are these abnormal cells, which are the largest cells on the peripheral blood. These are promyelocytes, like the buttock cells or flower cells with a large granular cytoplasm, confirming the diagnosis as one of the most lethal blood cancers, a type of AML, AML-M3. At the same time, one of the most curable cancers in the cancer history, with cure rates 90 to 95%, and the treatment is very simple: supraphysiologic doses of vitamin A and arsenic trioxide. So, but the diagnostic suspicion and diagnosis is very, very important. So the take-home message from this case is urgent hematology referral for medical emergencies associated with pancytopenia. So which are the circumstances where urgent hematology referral is mandatory because of the various medical emergencies associated with pancytopenia, and these are febrile neutropenia if a patient has severe leukopenia, severe neutropenia, along with that high fever spikes. Symptomatic severe anemia, symptomatic severe thrombocytopenia. So any severe cytopenia, hematology referral will be optimal. Again, pancytopenia associated with DIC, pancytopenia associated with abnormal peripheral blood, like features suggestive of microangiopathy or cancer cells or blast on the peripheral smear, or in a patient with suspicion of severe aplastic anemia with severe pancytopenia, or in a patient with suspicion of hemophagocytic lymphohistiocytosis or other metabolic emergencies like pancytopenia associated with symptomatic hypercalcemia, hyperkalemia, or tumor lysis syndrome. So these are the circumstances where urgent hematology referral is expected. Now, as I mentioned you earlier, so all these cases, the idea is to teach the approach to cases of pancytopenia through these cases. So as one of the famous saying by Albert Einstein, if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. Now coming to my case 3, this is again a young 26-year gentleman presenting with symptomatic anemia requiring repeated transfusions for a short duration of 3 weeks. And he also has mucocutaneous bleed, just like case 2 on and off for again short duration of 2 weeks. And he has fever associated with productive cough and facial pain of again short duration 1 week. So he has again symptomatic pancytopenia. All 3 lineages giving rise to symptomatic presentation. So look at his hemogram. There is severe pancytopenia, HB5, WBC 900, platelet 6000. Again, for a young gentleman, there is lymphocytic predominance, which is not expected. So in young gentlemen like him, the neutrophils should be the dominant cells on the peripheral smear, constituting about 40 to 60%. Here, the lymphocytes almost comprising of 80%. But there are no abnormal cells, but there is relative lymphocytosis with severe leukopenia. Again, macrocytosis near normal RDW, reticulocyte count 0. So here it is severe pancytopenia with macrocytic anemia with reticulocytopenia with normal RDW, right? So this is this. So clinically, how this patient looked like, he was quite sick, toxic looking, symptomatic severe pancytopenia. He has this nasty infection hanging on the bridge of the nose. An oral examination, you can see there is oral thrush eroding the lateral half of the tongue and the palate. And he has symptomatic mucocutaneous bleed like petechiae, ecchymosis, purpura all over the body. So because of his severe presentation, we decided to do bone marrow studies right upfront. Remember case 1, we didn't even thought of doing bone marrow because the clinical circumstances, the clinical history was very much suggestive of a benign etiology. Case 2, again, bone marrow is because of active coagulopathy was deferred, but the diagnosis was clear from the peripheral smear and the hemogram itself. Whereas this case 3, severe pancytopenia, sick, toxic patient, so suspicion of something. So we did bone marrow, and for the sake of understanding this, the figure on the left is a normal bone marrow. So the bone marrow cellularity is calculated by a simple formula, 100 minus age. For a 25-year gentleman, the bone marrow should have been 75% cellular, and this is the lower down figure is the patient's bone marrow biopsy picture. So it is completely empty, filled by fat spaces. So it's a hypoplastic marrow, suggesting the diagnosis as aplastic anemia. So the take-home message from case 2 is, which are the circumstances in patients presenting with pancytopenia where you need to plan upfront bone marrow studies, like if there are blasts in the blood and there is leukoerythroblastic picture, or there is severe pancytopenia like our case with reticulocytopenia, or at extremes of age, a patient presenting with pancytopenia at extremes of age, because mostly in the elderly population, because various hematological etiologies underline the causes of pancytopenia in elderly population as well as in young children. So these are the circumstances you need to plan upfront bone marrow studies in patients with pancytopenia. So of course, the timely diagnosis is very, very crucial. You can see from this picture, the aplastic anemia is a medical emergency, and with timely bone marrow transplant in young patients below 45 years of age, the cure rates can exceed 80 to 90%. Now, these are the indications of bone marrow transplant, not only hematological malignancies, but various non-malignant conditions like aplastic anemia, various hemoglobinopathies like thalassemia, sickle cell anemia, primary immunodeficiency disorders, storage disorders, uncontrolled autoimmune disorders can have a cure rate exceeding 80-90% with timely bone marrow transplant. So bone marrow transplant is a very curative treatment for most of the hematological conditions, not only hematological malignancies, but non-malignant conditions, as I mentioned earlier. There are common misconceptions about bone marrow transplant because bone marrow transplant is a subject close to my heart. Just brief about bone marrow transplant. It's not a major surgery like kidney or liver transplant. It is simple stem cell transfusion like platelet transfusion, but with lot of intricacies, and that's why we need a dedicated bone marrow transplanter and a dedicated bone marrow transplant unit. Again, blood group matching is not at all essential for bone marrow transplant. Particular gene matching like HLA gene matching, either full or half, is essential for successful bone marrow transplant. Again, many of the donors are scared to donate bone marrow or stem cells. They feel that their bone marrow is going to be extracted like just like kidney or liver transplant. It is not like so. We just collect the stem cells from the peripheral blood on an apheresis machine, just like platelet apheresis. And most important to remember for clinicians, many of us believe bone marrow transplant is the last step in management of various hematological disorders with dismal outcome. It is not so. Bone marrow transplant is the only curative therapy for many hematological disorders and can have a cure rate as high as 80 to 90% in vast majority of the cases. And like the famous saying, every ending is really just new beginning. This is appropriately true for most hematological conditions, like the cases which we had, like this seemingly incurable cases which have been cured because of timely bone marrow transplant. The figure on the left is a youngest child, 9 months, with severe Fanconi's anemia, is cured more than 4 years post bone marrow transplant. The two brothers, 6 year, 12 year, one of the first case in the world, which have been, both of them have been transplanted from a single international donor, and then they were misdiagnosed as ITP for years together. Actually, they were cases of Wiskott-Aldrich syndrome presenting with thrombocytopenia. Again, this is a case of severe aplastic anemia, undergoing 2 consecutive half-match transplant, one from father and one from mother. So double half-match transplant, and now she's cured more than 5 years post-transplant. So again, very deadly blood cancer AML for a renowned physician. At the age of 67 years, we did half-match transplant, and he had a significant improvement in the quality of life. So all these cases, it is important. I found this platform useful to create some awareness about hematology across, like medicine, future of medicine in hematology is very exciting. A lot of new things are coming, improving the outcomes and the success and cure rates across hematological spectrum. So like the famous saying, start by doing what is necessary, then do what's possible, and suddenly you realize you are doing the impossible. So coming to quickly going to case number 4, this is 11-year girl presenting with fever, generalized weakness. There are no localizing signs, symptoms for her fever. And this is a case of FU, for fever of unknown origin for almost 3 months. Apart from her FU, she has symptomatic transfusion dependent anemia for last 1.5 months. When she approached us, she was quite toxic, cachexic, and she has moderate pallor and hepatosplenomegaly on evaluation apart from pancytopenia. So this is her picture, severe pancytopenia, and she was hospitalized at multiple hospitals with inconclusive diagnosis. So based on her history, we did simple biochemical parameters. The ferritin was very, very high, 12,000, LDH high, triglycerides without pancreatitis was very high, 524, and she has severe hypofibrinogenemia despite without active coagulopathy, and LFT showed transaminitis. So based on these biochemical parameters, so this is a case of basically fever of unknown origin with pancytopenia with hepatosplenomegaly, and based on these biochemical parameters, she fitted the criteria for something, another lethal disease called as hemophagocytic lymphohistiocytosis, and this is the diagnostic criteria for the HLH. I'll skip that part for the sake of time, but HLH is a hyperinflammatory condition due to underlying various etiologies, most notably malignancies, uncontrolled infections, most notably fungal and viral infections, or autoimmune disorders, where there is uncontrolled inflammatory response. Even though the hemophagocytosis has derived its nomenclature, but it is not present, the hemophagocytosis is not present in bone marrow evaluation of all cases of HLH. It is present in only 15 to 25% of patients at diagnosis. So based on this, you can imagine such sick, toxic child with severe pancytopenia, adding immunosuppression with a clinical suspicion of HLH is a real challenge. If under treatment leads to high mortality, and over treatment can also kill these patients because these are already sick, toxic pancytopenic patients. The treatment for HLH is intense immunosuppression with dexamethasone, cyclosporine, etoposide, and that's what we did. And you can see nicely her hemoglobin, platelet count, and the WBC count recovered, and the biochemical parameters recovered. So the options for HLH are intense immunosuppression with steroids, cyclosporine, immunoglobulin, and etoposide. So the diagnosis is very important, and many of times you have to think differently in such sick, toxic patients with pancytopenia, because delay in diagnosis and delay in initiation of treatment can lead to very, very high mortality. Quickly jumping on to case 5, this is 46-year lady. A case of rheumatoid arthritis presents with symptomatic anemia requiring multiple transfusions for last 2 months. Again, she also gives history of recurrent sinopulmonary infections and fever associated night sweats for almost similar duration. Now you can see she has moderate pancytopenia, hemoglobin 7, WBC 2400, platelet 60,000. Again, there is relative lymphocytic predominance, almost 90% are lymphocyte, and on peripheral smear there is lymphocytosis with large granular lymphocytes with surface projections, and she has reticulocytopenia. So definitely she has large granular lymphocytes which are abnormal with surface projections, and that's why we did the immunophenotyping analysis of those abnormal cells. So you can see she has pallor, splenomegaly, lymphocytosis on bone marrow, and immunophenotyping. These lymphocytes were consistent with T cell large granular lymphocytes, and these markers CD3, 56, 57 were positive. So this is a case of T cell large granular lymphocytic leukemia in a patient with pre-existing rheumatoid arthritis. Now, even though this is a leukemia, the prognosis is extremely good. Many of these autoimmune disorders can predispose to various hematological malignancies, most notably lymphomas. So TLGL is kind of because of prolonged immunosuppression can be seen. So she was treated with immunosuppressive therapy with cyclosporine and cyclophosphamide for 6 months. She counts completely normalized, complete resolution of all her constitutional symptoms, and she is currently on tapering immunosuppression. So proper diagnosis with simple evaluation can be very, very rewarding in hematology, and hematology is like mathematics. A simple workup will lead you to gratifying results in terms of diagnosis and curative therapy interventions. So the take-home message from this case is pancytopenia with splenomegaly, things to the etiologies to be considered. The common thing, CLD with portal hypertension, various infections, like India being a tropical country, these infections in various geographic pockets are common, like malaria, leishmaniasis, disseminated tuberculosis, EBV, various autoimmune disorders with or without secondary autoimmune myelofibrosis and primary myelofibrosis, and various lymphomas can present with splenomegaly, like splenic marginal zone lymphoma, large granulocytic lymphoma, hairy cell lymphoma. So this is just a spot, a patient labeled as chronic liver disease, but has severe symptomatic transfusion dependent anemia, and she was labeled as chronic liver disease with portal hypertension for more than 3 years, and she was referred to hematologist because of disproportionate transfusion dependence. So her hemoglobin always used to be low, and she required blood transfusions almost every 2-3 weeks. When she came to us, we did simple peripheral smear, and you can see there is something called as leukoerythroblastic picture, teardrop red blood cells, nucleated RBCs, and immature myeloid series cells. Based on this, we did bone marrow biopsy, and you can see, remember the normal bone marrow slide I projected in the previous case. This bone marrow looks completely cellular with this waveform. So this is basic, and these large cells, these are megakaryocytes. So megakaryocytes are increased, atypical, and all this waveform pinkish material is fibrosis. So this was actually a case of primary myelofibrosis presenting with huge splenomegaly with reverse portal hypertension, being wrongly diagnosed as CLD with portal hypertension. She was started on targeted therapy for primary myelofibrosis, the JAK2 inhibitor. With that, her splenomegaly completely resolved, and her transfusion dependent anemia resolved, her hemoglobin recovered, and she is transfusion independent for past 1.5 years. So like I'm from Hyderabad and we are movie lovers. So like the famous, Telugu cinema suspense Vaikatappa killed Bahubali, fetching highest revenues for Bahubali 2. The more why we ask ourselves, the more wise we become in clinical medicine. This is my almost last case. A 74-year renowned surgeon from Gulbarga presents with symptomatic transfusion-dependent anemia for 3 months and was loaded with multiple courses of IV iron and parenteral butyrate supplements. Considering this as nutritional anemia, it took 3 months for the clinicians caring for him there to refer this case to us. And when he came to us, this was his hemogram, severe anemia, moderate leukopenia with preserved WBC differential and modest thrombocytopenia. So the problem lies in more pronounced symptomatic severe anemia. Again, macrocytosis, little high RDW and reticulocytopenia. So again, we did a simple peripheral blood smear evaluation, and you can see there are dysmorphic or abnormal cells. So this neutrophil has one nuclear lobe that is abnormal. This is called as hyposegmented neutrophil. There are abnormal cells, one blast on the peripheral smear, and based on this abnormal cells or circulating dyspoietic cells, we did bone marrow, and bone marrow also showed abnormality in all the 3 hematopoietic lineages. For the sake of understanding, this is the largest cell in the bone marrow, megakaryocyte. Normally, megakaryocyte nucleus is like multi-lobated, like popcorn, but here it has 3 distinct nuclei. So this is multinucleated megakaryocyte, and likewise there are abnormal cells in the myeloid and erythroid series. So he has hypercellular marrow with trilineage dysplasia with blast, and the diagnosis is simple: myelodysplastic syndrome. And he was started with some targeted drugs, and he became transfusion independent with marked improvement in his quality of life, and operating at the age of 76 years successfully post this diagnosis and post this successful therapeutic intervention. So the take-home message for is pancytopenia in elderly. Besides nutritional megaloblastosis, which is again common in elderly population, please consider important hematological etiologies like myelodysplastic syndrome, myeloma, or leukemia, based depending upon the clinical history. So my last case, 28-year lady, symptomatic anemia, fever, oral thrush, short duration, 10 days. And on leading questions, she mentions that whenever she develops fever, she is being put on anti-epileptics because she has history of febrile seizures from her early childhood. So this time she was started on levetiracetam because levetiracetam is supposed to be, the treating clinician thought levetiracetam is the most safest anti-epileptic, and this time with the history of this febrile episode, she was started on levetiracetam for 9 days. And you can see on the hemogram, there is dominant bicytopenia, platelets almost normal, 1 lakh. So hemoglobin is almost mildly suppressed, 9.8. But the problem here is pronounced leukopenia with more severe neutropenia. Again, RBC indices normal, reticulocyte count normal. So this is something called as, if only one lineage is severely suppressed, this is called as agranulocytosis. And this because of this severe neutropenia, you can see on the oral examination there is thrush eroding the palate, and on bone marrow evaluation there is maturation arrest in the WBC series beyond the myelocyte metamyelocyte stage. So this is a case of drug-induced granulocytosis. So the drug was withheld, and she was aggressively supported with neutropenic care along with GCSF. The offending drug was withdrawn. So the take-home message here is drug-induced pancytopenia. The common obvious etiologies first in appropriate clinical circumstances. So these are the drugs notably associated with agranulocytosis or pancytopenia, like antimicrobials, NSAIDs, anti-epileptics, antithyroids, various anti-arrhythmic drugs, antipsychotic drugs, immunosuppressants, and diuretics. So please make a note of these drugs. These can be lead to such severe symptomatic agranulocytosis or pancytopenia, and many times, if it is not diagnosed in time, patient can have high mortality because of severe neutropenic sepsis. Again, a spot case for students on this dais, a polytrauma patient with pancytopenia. So you can see a polytrauma patient probably has hemothorax. That's why there are these chest drains, and you can see there is oozing from the chest drain side. The oozing is so pronounced that the bed sheet is completely soaked with blood. There is huge laceration mark here and the temperature is subnormal. So basically this is polytrauma with DIC. The cause of pancytopenia is DIC. So India being a tropical country, the common etiology is first. So lot of many infectious presentations, infectious diseases can present with pancytopenia. Most notable of them are dengue, leptospirosis, malaria, and rickettsiosis. So these common etiologies need to be ruled out first before considering the uncommon rare etiologies. So I'm sure based on these 7 cases, you will agree with me that each patient of pancytopenia is different, and this is a flow chart to assess the cases of pancytopenia. Depending upon the pace and trajectory of cytopenias, you can decide the investigation batteries. So the most important here is the hemogram in constellation with appropriate clinical evaluation can fetch you to various differential in most of the circumstances. So again, organomegaly or not, your differentials can be narrowed down. Again, an important, interesting case, a young lady presenting with acute onset altered sensorium was admitted in neuro ICU, and on day 3, hematology referral was given because of her persistent severe thrombocytopenia. I'm sure this is not an actual dia. So you can see there are broken RBC. So this is a case of TTP presenting with severe thrombocytopenia and pancytopenia. So like these cases, and like the famous saying, eyes are useless when the mind is blind, unless and until you think of these different differentials based on your careful clinical evaluation and simple hemogram, you won't end up with appropriate diagnosis. I'm sorry for this busy slide. So this is an approach for pancytopenia. Before I conclude, the clinical tips for pancytopenia, based on whether the patient has associated organomegaly like hepatosplenomegaly or without hepatosplenomegaly, the differentials can be divided. I'll just quickly run over. Again, the pancytopenia can be an incidental finding for evaluation of other presentation, or it can be the cytopenias can be so severe to be the presenting symptoms. So whether the presenting scenario is the cytopenias themselves or incidental finding, the approach has to be devised. Again, the pancytopenia, the causes related to pancytopenia can be the presentation many times like lymphadenopathy, splenomegaly, and atrophic glossitis in megaloblastic anemia. So these are the important aspects useful in clinical history in patients presenting with pancytopenia: age, sex, occupation, diet, history of various drugs, chemicals, radiation exposure. The other associated findings like bone pain, constitutional symptoms, or symptoms related to the various causes of splenomegaly. So with this, I think to conclude about pancytopenia, managing pancytopenia is a common clinical challenge with variable presentation. The pace of evaluation is often guided by the severity and trajectory of cytopenias and the patient's clinical status. Emergencies associated with pancytopenia, as I highlighted from case 2, require immediate hospitalization as well as early hematological consultation. Emphasis on clinical presentation with more emphasis on well-read hemogram and stepwise approach to diagnosis and therapy is rational in all cases. And most important, distinction of benign pancytopenia from the crucial ones should guide us with appropriate treatment strategy. Primary physicians remain the key leaders for the success of most hematological issues, and close collaboration with hematologists can be even more rewarding and gratifying in terms of successful patient outcomes. So before I conclude, I like to emphasize again the famous Charles Darwin's theorem. It is not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent one, but the one who is most responsive to change. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I know I might have overshoot time, but if all my teachers permit, I will be happy to answer if there are any questions on this platform. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Ganesh, for your excellent talk. Very, very informative. And then with all your quotations and self-explanatory, we really enjoyed the talk. And I think students definitely might have been benefited. And then those who are the consultants who also attended, really appreciate your talk. And it's very, very, simple, very palatable, easily digestible. And your approach to the pancytopenia as a exemplary. I thank you once again, and then now open it for the students if there are any queries. And then I think he's given a lot of tips also. These tips I think will make the things easy. Further, if there are any questions or clarification, you are most welcome. I request Dr. Ganesh to bear best, but you have covered within good, though we lost some few minutes before, but you have covered to the extent and to the satisfaction form. Thank you once again.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. So there are two questions in the chat box.
Yeah.
One is, can septicemia lead to pancytopenia? Yes, it's very important clinical question. Severe sepsis can lead to pancytopenia because of the marrow suppression by the underlying, most notably seen in disseminated fungal infections and viral infections. And another important issue to remember in severe sepsis associated pancytopenia is to rule out HLH, because severe sepsis can also be associated with HLH, though not that common, but if HLH is missed, can have a catastrophic consequences. So yes, severe sepsis can be associated with pancytopenia, and either directly because of disseminated infection, severe sepsis, or as due to secondary HLH. Second question is, if vitamin B12 deficiency is diagnosed as a cause for pancytopenia, bone marrow examination is indicated. Again, a very important and very practical question. As I mentioned earlier, my first case was megaloblastic anemia. Because the clinical history and hemogram itself was so revealing, we didn't even thought of doing bone marrow. So if the clinical suspicion and the hemogram is suggestive of megaloblastosis, you don't need bone marrow studies in all cases of megaloblastosis.
I think to cover, if there are no questions further, I think we have to wind up. Thank you once again, Dr. Ganesh, for your excellent talk. And
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. And once again, my apologies to be late on this presentation. And thank you, Balraju sir, and the entire National Board team for giving me this opportunity. And take care, stay safe.
We wish that we'll have more classes from you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.